Good morning, everybody. I think we're mainly European, apart from my colleague in the US, so we've got a smashing of people across the globe. Apologies for the connection. I don't know how I'm coming across, whether it was just Tom's connection.
You're good, Mark.
Okay. So that leads me on to, come on to the next slide, Debbie. And right, so I think that leads us on to just, I'm going to cover some of the best behaviours that I see across our business. So I'm responsible for delivery for all of our clients internationally within NTT Data Services. So I have people, I have staff across 5 continents, and we manage services across the globe. So every country has a different definition of key worker. Every client has a different view of prioritization, and we're working through that. And I guess also the spread of Corona has clearly been different from starting in China, moving through EMEA, and now most of the globe. Not all of the globe still, actually, not all countries. But I'm going to give a picture of some of the behaviours that I see that are really examples of good practice, best practice. And I'm going to come on with my view of the next 6 months. And I think it is a personal view, although I've counselled lots of people, clients, suppliers, advisors, in terms of that. Nobody can obviously predict the next 6 months, because I guess anybody on this call, if I challenge you to predict the next week, we would all probably struggle with the changing landscape. So this is just a picture. So I guess in terms of what we do see, work from home, there has been an explosion. Are we configured to work from home even today? Well, we can tell we've got connection problems. We are still struggling with moving the huge workforce of millions of people that deliver IT services across the globe to virtually all of them working from home. We in my business still have quite a lot of people actually delivering services in the US. We run and supply services to a huge sector of the healthcare business, in the healthcare sector in the US and Canada, and clearly we have a lot of people on hospital sites. So we have a huge amount of people working still client side as well. By explosion that, we'll come on to security. So Matthew will cover security. All of us are looking at how do we maintain security, data integrity, particularly in BPO. How do we ensure that that is maintained? And that's a real struggle for the BPO industry. Less so in perhaps core infrastructure and app services, but certainly in BPO. The volume fluctuations that we're seeing, no contract could have ever predicted. So clearly sectors that are being more challenged, travel, hospitality, logistics, are now really ramping down operations. Banking and financial services, we're seeing increases in volumes because of increased activity, and certainly in healthcare, tech, media, and telecom, vast increases, and consumer retail clearly as well. So projects reprioritization. So interestingly, in my business, we've seen a balance of all of these things going on. So we've seen projects come forward and clients wanting to accelerate projects. So network refresh, tech refresh, security enhancements. We've seen projects put on hold, and we've seen projects still maintaining. So there's a balance of all of that. Unfortunately, we are seeing now the real significant increase in people isolating and people being affected by the virus. And as soon as clearly you get somebody identified, they've been in contact with people maybe, that closes down operations. And we're now starting to see scarce skills come through. How do we support clients? How do we get through managing mission critical services? In those industries that I've mentioned, and clearly all of industry, we're going through huge cost, but huge cash pressures as well. So responding to that. And then the last point is we've got huge technology shortages. So examples being network bandwidth, but typically networks have been over provisioned. So that's not such a bad thing, but most of our technology comes from China, and we are seeing now the lag of manufacturing closed down in China really hitting us in terms of critical services. So that's what we face. I think from my business, generally we're seeing ramping down, business as usual, and ramping up. And most of my days are spent, how do we balance everybody's requirements and businesses around focusing on the right priorities? And so it is actually, how do you leverage things from perhaps some services that aren't needed into some services that are needed? How do you manage across the geographies as well? Best behaviours that I've seen, full transparency. So that's client side and supplier side, really truly understanding the challenges, really working out how you can move resources around, really understanding what the business challenge is for that particular hour or day, because it is changing. I see true collaboration. So, we have forums every day, managing the now, the next week, and the future. Suppliers are working side by side. There's no competition involved. Everyone is pitching forward, working with client side IT, working with the business around really focusing on what can be done. And then coming back to that, how do you rapidly respond to some of the things that are going on? And it is around what I've seen around what is the business problem. Fortunately, I don't have any clients personally that have resorted to contract yet. It is all around what is the business problem that we're trying to achieve that day, that week, and how do we focus upon that priority, using all of the resources, be it client side, be it supply side, be it a competitor of ours, to focus on that. And then I think the last point is extreme flexibility and agility. So again, coming back to my point, although Tom was talking about force majeure, the contract, I haven't got any contract in any of my clients that predicted and articulated what to do in this situation. So it is around.
Mark, can I ask you a question? How are you documenting all? Because this is presumably incredibly fast moving. You're being really flexible. How are you keeping track of because presumably you're making variations to the contract. How are you adjusting strategies so that in 6 months' time they say, well, they remember how helpful you are now, because it's all written down.
Yeah. So best and again, I've got multiple clients across the globe. So best practice is that we are documenting all of the governance that is going on. So we're tracking every meeting with proper minutes, proper actions that can then be fed back straight into procurement and contracting. And I think other scenarios where in actual fact we're having to make decisions and gather up that at the end of the week or the end of the month and then feed it back in. I think the one thing I would say, the prominent thing is the business and the operations in this situation are making the decisions involving the relevant finance, contracting, legal organisations, and clearly involving them. But it's much more about business focus rather than contract focus, in my view.
Yeah. Understandably, yeah.
So I'm supposed to only keep to 8 minutes or 10 minutes. So key things assisted by. So again, best practice assisted by. Kerry talked about the GSA and the standard that we have within the GSA. What the best organisations and the best way I've seen that we're getting through it is where strategic sourcing has been enabled, and it's much more of a partnership based upon value and based upon business outputs. Because the business priority is changing every hour, every day, redetermining that value and prioritising against the value is where all of the discussions are. And if we leave it at a transactional level, then we get caught in transactional discussions rather than business value. Second point is where organisations have a blended ecosystem, then they can actually leverage a lot more across the globe. And by blended, I mean in-source services, outsource services, services that are nearshore, onshore, offshore, services that are distributed globally, all of those, and services that are actually from smaller organisations as well as larger organisations. So once you've got a blend, you can actually use the variability in all of those services, because you cannot actually predict at any point in time what the next week is going to look like in terms of the pain that's being suffered. Tom talked around DR and BCP. I would probably say that about 10%, maybe 20% have comprehensive BCP plans that we've managed to use as a foundation to guide us. So clearly, a lot of the BCP planning is now being done in a reactive basis that we're finding. Organisations that have truly encompassed cloud and virtualisation are actually managing to flex their resource models quite significantly. And the last point is those organisations that have put in place digital architectures, be they a digital worker or complete digital architectures enabling retailing, e-commerce, B2B commerce, are absolutely winning in this current times. So that's what I see in terms of current times. Looking at the next 6 months, next slide.
Mark, can you do this one really quickly, because keeping an eye on time.
Sorry, I always talk too much, sorry. Stabilisation, so we are still in stabilisation mode. So all of those people we've moved to delivering services, that needs to solidify. We need to increase security, data integrity, and then we need to move to the new norm. So we don't know what the new norm is, but it will certainly involve lots more people working from home. It will certainly involve a cashless society. It will certainly involve much more risk planning and a digital economy. So certainly that. We will see sourcing move from being reacting to current, how do we manage current scenarios, to restart procurements in a much more agile manner. We are going to see when services come back and when industries come back to some sort of level of business normality, there will be an increased investment required in terms, or prioritization, should I say, in terms of security, digital work, digital everything. 5G will become much more relevant in terms of delivering out its business cases, certainly cloud and certainly AI. We will see much more right shoring. I'll come back to that blended ecosystem. So I think there will be a lot more insourcing, but at the same time, I think that will be blended by a lot more outsourcing, where organizations. So I think overall, the industry will stay about the same in terms of level of insourcing and outsourcing, but companies will make a conscious decision and will change that. And we'll also find a lot more country decisions around where should services be delivered from, and a lot more consideration around follow the sun delivery and truly distributing service delivery. Clearly, lessons learned. So in the current climate, things are going well in a lot of spaces, but things aren't going so well in a lot of other areas, and it is going to be tough in the next few weeks and months. And there will be supplier rationalisation. There will be ongoing views around who has supported, who has partnered, who has exhibited the right behaviours, and that will go forward in terms of delivery. And then the last point is, clearly we are going to head into and are already day to day fighting with huge cost pressures, and a significant amount of the clients are suffering huge difficulties, and therefore how do we work through that over the next few months in terms of support, all of us together as an ecosystem. But as we come back, we are going to have to look at the next level of transformation within our industry, and that will be truly encompassing automation enterprise. It will be truly mapping cloud and unit-based services across the business, and it will be proper shared services and less dedicated services.